we're going to do is start recording the webinar. So just so you guys know, we're going to record it so we can post it up on our website. So I went ahead and kicked that off. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll results so that we can get started. So today we're going to talk about SQL Server Denali, the next edition. Is it going to be SQL Server 11, SQL Server 12? We don't really know yet. But what we really want to know is what's in the box. The number doesn't really mean too much to us at the end of the day. What we're really concerned about is, what is it going to mean to us for our daily life, and as DBAs and developers and BI folks and the folks who are all using different pieces and parts of the product. So what's really exciting about today's presentation is normally you get to listen to one person kind of talk for 45 minutes or an hour. Sometimes Brian or I let you guys drive, which is pretty cool. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. At the past summit, which is coming up, which most of you guys should be checking out. If you can't go, definitely make sure that you're checking out your user groups and things like that so you can get a lot of that good content. But the past summit coming up, there's going to be a lot of sessions they call panel sessions, and that's where they bring a bunch of guys from Microsoft or a bunch of community experts together, and you guys get to ask a lot of questions. They talk about areas that are important to them and things that they enjoy doing. And so that's what we wanted to kind of do today. So I'm going to talk some first about some of the BI features in the new edition of Denali, and then I'm going to turn it over to Troy Gallant, who is one of our architects here at Pragmatic Works, along with Chad and Gareth and Bear. They're all part of our senior staff here at Pragmatic Works, and they're all really focused on being forward-looking and looking at some of these new features and some of these new things that are coming out. So some of the cool stuff that we're going to talk about today, we're really going to focus on the newest and favorite features that are going to impact you. So obviously, Microsoft sometimes does a really great job of marketing these features. Sometimes they do not so good of a job of marketing some of these features, kind of like the picture on our slide deck there. But it's really going to be a combination of panel discussion and demos. So most of the guys on the deck today have demos to show you. We're going to try to walk through features wherever we can. Some of the features are big enterprise features that would require 6 servers, and we didn't set all that up yet. But we've got some great T-SQL features, as well as some developer features like for your .NET developers and for your advanced DBAs. We've got security and contained databases that Chad's going to talk about, as well as Gareth is going to talk about always-on functionality, the new super high availability, robust capability that's now being built into SQL Server 2011 or 12, SQL Server Denali. We're not sure what the number is going to be yet. So as we get started here, I am going to jump in and start talking about some of the BI features. We tried to make this kind of a best of both worlds, kind of do a 360-degree view of what you're going to get with SQL Server Denali. So you can see improvements on the development side, improvements from security and manageability, improvements in the way that you're going to interact with your developers and the folks that are going to consume and work with these data environments that you're putting together and managing, as well as availability and analytics. So we have a lot of sessions that we've done in the past on BI features. Brian did a great one on Crescent that's up on our website that you guys can go check out and stream. And there's a few other sessions that we'll be doing here coming up over the next couple of weeks to go in detail into some of these BI features. So I would encourage you, as we talk about them, obviously there's a bunch of them. There's white papers just listing summary after summary of each feature. But what I really want to do today is touch on each one and kind of talk about the most important ones and see, which ones are going to be the most important to you. So what I would encourage you to do is to email me at adam@pragmaticworks.com and let me know which topics you'd like to see more about when it comes to Denali, and we'll make sure that we get those worked in for you into the rotation without too much delay. All right? So with that, I'm going to jump over and start talking about BI features. You guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about what we're going to talk about, so we'll jump into it. So the first, some of these you're going to think, that's not a BI feature, that's a DBA feature, but I'm going to tell you why they apply to BI. And there are more features than this, but these are just the ones that I wanted to call out right away. So again, I'm going to do the BI features, and then we'll move forward over to Troy to do some new T-SQL dev, and then we'll see some of the other cool stuff from Chad and the rest of the gang. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Columnstore Indexes, or Project Apollo. And you guys, like me, probably heard a lot about this leading up to Denali and to some of the CTP releases and that kind of thing. But in reality, what is a column store index? What does that do for us? And there's some great presentations out on Channel 9 on MSDN, little short videos from some guys on the project team where they kind of explain it a little bit. But basically, Column Store came out of Vertipack, or the column-based compression and storage engine that they built into Power Pivot in analysis services with the BI Semantic Model. And so it's a new technology that was developed to basically store more data, get better compression, and really be the first database platform to have a true column store type database. And what that means is, instead of storing rows across multiple pages, we store individual columns. We flip the script a little bit, and we store individual columns entirely on their own pages. And what that allows for is significantly increased speed across star joins and multi-table joins. There's a couple of limitations. You can only have one column store index per table. They can't be a filtered index. And there's a few other things that you'll want to read up on. They're still kind of working out what some of those limitations are going to be here before the final release. But in a lot of cases, they've seen things from 100% or 100 times improvement in star join and similar queries. So especially for data warehousing queries and things of that nature, you're really going to get a lot of bang for your buck with this new star join capability from column store indexing. It's really going to give you a lot of cool stuff. The next thing that we've got in BI is a full text search overhaul. So I don't know how many of you guys have used full text search in the past. I haven't done a ton of work with full text search in between 2000 and 2008, and then I started using it again in 2008. And in 2000, it was pretty dismal. I mean, did not a lot of functionality. It worked pretty well when you had it up and running, but if you had a really large database, it was a lot of overhead. The full text search has brought magnitudes of performance and scale advances because they've significantly improved query execution and concurrent index updates. So now you can do properties for scope searches without requiring your developers to maintain all the file properties separately in the database. The developers can now get a lot of benefit by using near operators. That's going to allow them to specify the distance in between as well as the order of the words. So there's a lot of really cool things we're going to be able to do to make our searching of that data a lot more dynamic. So if you're looking in a BI context and you've got a lot of just sort of unstructured data that you're bringing in, and you only want to search for rows that are going to have value added, maybe it's customer data, maybe it's responses to polls or questions or marketing data or customer complaints. One of the things that we use this for is we've worked with clients to download significant amounts of data from Twitter, folks that are posting things about them, so about their company or their organization, and they're looking for keywords like great customer service experience, or like the one I posted for Sprint the other day that said customer service fail, things like that. That's what they're looking for. They want to be able to pull those out quickly and not have to weed through 2 billion tweets that are coming across the wire every 15 seconds. So there's a lot of really cool things that are coming out, as well as adding support for a couple of additional languages. I know one of them is Czech and one of them is Greek. So for those of you who do business in the Mediterranean and in Eastern and Western Europe, there's going to be a lot of really cool things coming out for that, and some more full text searching capabilities around that. Now, we can also partition our tables with up to 15,000 partitions now. That's going to help really large sliding window scenarios where you're rolling partitions in, rolling partitions out. And it's going to help streamline your maintenance of your large data sets, especially within file groups where you need data switched in and out based on the needs for your particular data warehouse. So there's a lot of functionality and capability that we can do with 15,000 partitions. In addition, it's going to give you the capability to archive data more flexibly, if that's a word. I'm going to invent words. But it's going to allow you to move more data off while still keeping it partitioned at the granularity that you might like, so that you're still getting partition elimination and faster seek times and all the benefits that typically come with partitioning, but without having to consolidate all those partitions toward the end of the life cycle for that data as it goes back maybe onto a little bit slower disk or something of that nature. We've also got Crescent data exploration, and really Crescent is such a sweet little tool, and it's really designed to it rides in SharePoint. And if you guys want to see more about Crescent, Brian did a whole webinar on Crescent just last week or the week before, and it's posted up on our website, so you guys can go stream that later. Don't go there right now, but you can go stream it a little bit later. and he'll walk through some examples. But basically, Crescent's going to give you the ability to do a lot of things that Report Builder should have been able to do with visualizations and other things, and it's got a lot of really nice ways to explore and manipulate your data. Crescent connects directly to Power Pivot workbooks, to other data in SharePoint. It's got a lot of flexibility, and it's really designed as the visualization tool for what I call the Power Pivot generation. So it's going to go in and connect very well with your Power Pivot galleries. You're going to be able to launch Crescent reports directly out of those galleries, and it's all integrated directly into SharePoint. The downside of Crescent, if you're not running SharePoint, you're not going to get Crescent. You can't run Crescent outside of SharePoint. It's a SharePoint integrated product. So as of right now, you're really going to need to have SharePoint to make that work. But that being said, it's built on top of this BI Semantic Model, which we're going to talk about next. And that BI Semantic Model provides a really user-friendly view of the data. And for those of you who haven't seen it, essentially, it's instead of building an analysis services cube, like you're dragging in dimensions and fact tables and those types of things and lining everything up, it's another way to design cubes up to a certain scale. And so it gives you more of a tabular view, more of an Excel type view, where the end users can see their data, combine it a little bit more logically than they might need to split it out per se in an analysis services environment. And having that capability, we can now publish those semantic models out to SharePoint or out to an analysis services instance, and Power Pivot can connect to them, Crescent can connect to them, reporting services can connect to them. So there's a lot of really good capabilities that are coming out with the new semantic model and Crescent data exploration. The semantic model in Crescent is probably the biggest topic at past Summit this year, and it was one of the biggest topics at TechEd. So if you want to go check out sessions that are streamed from TechEd on TechEd's website from this year, there's a lot of good stuff out there that you can see, some of the visualizations and demos, and of course Brian's webinar that he did a couple weeks ago on our website at pragmaticworks.com. So a couple of other things I want to mention before I turn it over to these guys. Reporting services, end user reporting. Now, what I really mean by that is the capability to not only do better self-service reporting, but also to do some alerting. End user alerting is going to increase productivity because it's going to be able to provide data-driven alerts. So when it's going to check for data changes in the background and then send an alert message or trigger a report to get sent out. So all of these, things where we're used to write SSIS packages and scripts and PowerShell and all these different things to check data and then send a report, even data-driven subscriptions didn't really give us what we wanted. This alerting capability allows the end user to sort of tailor those data conditions to their own needs, which is going to give a lot better responsiveness and a lot better performance. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that comes out about that. Now, we could spend 5 hours on the new SSIS features that are coming out, but we're not going to. The biggest thing I want to focus on is really some of the management features. There are some new features that really are focused on deployment and administration enhancements. There's impact and lineage analysis that's now finally built into a certain level in SSIS. There's going to be features that provide for consolidating and comparing packages, where we can actually compare two packages and then merge them. So there's a lot of really cool things that are coming out, as well as some new overall management features, a new management console, and a few other things that are coming out with SSIS. So stay tuned for that. Not a lot has been released on that, but the Pro SSIS book from Rox is going to have a lot of good content in that. That's a shameless plug for Brian and some of the guys here for their book. One of the reasons we've been lucky enough to explore so many of these features already is because here at Pragmatic Works, we're actually leading the author teams for the Professional SSIS book, the Professional SQL Server Admin book, as well as the SQL Server Bible for the Denali edition. So it's really exciting. All those books will be out right around the time the product gets released. So we'll be able to explore all these new features and keep providing you guys information right up until the release comes. The coolest thing that a lot of people are really looking forward to when it comes to BI, though, is really data quality services. And that's a big word, right? We've talked about master data. We talk about data quality. We talk about all these different things. But at the end of the day, data quality is never going to be perfect. And it's a completely new service to SQL Server. So DQS is really going to help us round out that end-to-end data management, because it provides tools that customers can use to really create and maintain that quality knowledge base, which helps really to improve the data quality and ease data management. So specifically, there's data quality components for SSIS that are going to go in there. They're going to allow you to validate data and cleanse data against your data quality knowledge base. So it's going to give you a lot of capabilities to use that master data that you're working with, whether it's through MDS and SQL Server, your own homegrown or a third party, and actually reference those, cleanse the data, and really make sure that it's working really well. It's also got a lot of capability to access the new Azure Marketplace data market as well. So if you use public data to do data cleansing, if you're looking for zip codes and county names and all that kind of good stuff, you're going to be able to access the Azure Marketplace data market as well as any other tools that are available out there for third parties. So with that, there's even more BI features, but we don't have time to do every single one of them today. But I wanted to make sure we got a chance to cover most of the ones that I think are going to be the most important, at least to give you guys a heads up for the ones where you can say, hey, that's going to be interesting. I think I want to take a look at that. And I want to take this opportunity to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Troy Gallant, and he's going to talk to us about some of the new T-SQL and development features and demo some of those for us. So, Troy, without any further ado, I'm going to make you the presenter, sir.
I'm here. All right. Let me make sure I get the right screen showing. Okay. Adam, you still there?
I'm still here, buddy.
Can you see my slide?
It looks great.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good afternoon or good morning, I guess, depending upon where you are across this land here, and very nice that you could join us this morning for this this presentation on Denali. I'm going to real quickly go over just a very few, actually only 5, because this is only about a 10-15 minute session here, my portion, new enhancements in the T-SQL area that are going to be included with most likely included with the Denali release. At least they were included with the CTP releases, and these are some that have been you didn't know you needed, and some you knew you needed. But some of these are really nice. And again, it's only only 5 of them I'm going to touch on briefly, when there are actually many more. So let's move forward. My slide deck is almost as exciting as Adam's was. Anyway, really quickly, my agenda for today is I'm going to go over the new format construct. Then I'm going to briefly talk about what it can do and how you can start formatting dates in a much easier fashion. I'm also going to talk about some of the replacements that they're not replacements but additions and other options you have for the traditional case statement and T-SQL construct. We're going to talk about the new offset and fetch. This is something that people have been waiting for quite a long time, and it was available in other platforms, but we now have a much easier way of handling paging with this offset and fetch commands. As well, another one that's been around, especially for those of you who are familiar with Oracle databases and programming. The sequence command has been around for a while in Oracle, and now it's coming over to the Microsoft side. So we're really happy to get that, and that's actually one of my favorite cool new features. And then I thought this one was kind of cool because it's always been a problem for SQL developers. Not a problem, but it's always been much more difficult than we felt it needs to be. And that's the end of month. How do we quickly get the last day of this month, or whatever month we're looking at? So those are the 5 that we're going to touch on real quickly. And with that is 2/3 of my slide deck, everybody. So I'm going to try right now to transfer over to my virtual machine here. There it is. Okay. And just so we know we're all on the same page here, we're going to check the version here just to make sure that everybody knows. Okay, here we go. We are on Denali CTP 3 11.0. So see that this virtual machine is working VM Lite, and it's indeed running off of this new CTP 3 organization. All right, the first one we said we were going to touch was the format command. And this is kind of interesting. The new format command has always been a little bit harder to deal with dates and inverting dates than it needed to be, and that's where this nice little new format command comes in. And the basic structure is that you have a value, and then you tell it what format you want it, and optionally you can include what culture you'd like to, or what language you'd like to have it formatted in. And I'll show you a couple examples of that right here. Here's today's date, and we're going to use this in this format, and we're going to use it. Let me get rid of all the squiggly lines here. That worked. There we go. IntelliSense doesn't work too well with a CTP. Anyway, so here we go. We're gonna format it in French in this format right here, as you can see here. So it comes out now. I don't speak French, so I'm not even going to pretend to be able to pronounce Thursday in French, jeudi or something like that. So anyway, so you can see here that we've not only formatted in the proper in the format that we wanted, but we've also changed the language if we wanted as well. Here's another way we do it. We do it 3 different ways here. We're going to this indicates right here that we're going to do it by the default format, because there's no option here, and I'm sorry, that is the format option, and there's no language. We're going to go by the default language, which in this case, of course, is English. Here we're going to do it the same date, but we're also going to format it in Great Britain version of the date, and then just because it was interesting, once the other character set, I decided Japanese for this one. And you can see how it goes here. So see how easily it is to convert these columns, or convert this date into the different formats in our default. Here's the way it is. It is most likely done in Great Britain, and of course in Japanese. And one of the way we can here's another interesting thing about this, is that we can also do it in a custom format, like we are familiar with in VB scripting and other scripting languages. So we can say, hey, let's do it in any custom format. Here's a year followed by the month name, the month written in. These are the month numbers, the month written, Spanish. These will come in the default languages because there's no language specified. We can see how we go around. So the first one does the year and then the month, the year and then the written out month name, and then of course there is this custom format followed in Spanish. So very interesting. There's no easy way, while doing research for this presentation, to go ahead and find out which all cultures you have available, but I did find this command right here that works in PowerShell. So you can scroll it up there, and I know it scrolled down very fast, but there was about 300 different formatting codes you can use, if you can see them all here. So you can see the wide options that you have here. Plenty of them. So that is the new format command, and that's going to be very, very handy for those of you who have to convert dates. Now a couple different options for the not necessarily replacing it, but alternates to the case statement, the traditional case statement that we had. This one is probably familiar with very familiar to some Visual Basic programmers, or VB scripting, or VBA programmers of the past, or currently. The IIF statement. The if statement is basically a case statement that's embedded within a single line, and you have your options here. There's your did that backwards. There's your condition right here, and here's what happens if the condition is true, and here's what happens if the condition is false. So what we're saying is, if int1 is greater than int2, go ahead and print out the word true. If not, go out to print the word false. So as we expected, the word false comes in. So that's very interesting. And of course, these are, I'm putting in string literals here, but they can be anything at all. They can be values from a table. They can be parameters. They can do anything. You can put anything you want in here. And here, as of course, make your comparison operator, as long as it evaluates to a true or false, as complicated as you need to be. So that's a nice way of getting around the traditional case statement. And another one that you're probably familiar with, those Visual Basic and VBA programmers, is this choose statement. Basically, you're iterating through this list and choosing this value. Now, of course, it doesn't seem like it'd be that exciting if I just did it this way, because I could have just selected C. But imagine if these were variables that were selected or figured out or computed ahead of it, and then you had a list of parameters right there. So you can see that it says, okay, go ahead and pick the third one, A, B, and C, and go ahead and collect it. So. And you can certainly see how this might come in handy with parameterizing different options there. The next one, the third one we're going to talk about, is the offset fetch. Now this is a welcome addition. Traditionally, we had to do something like this if we wanted to figure out paging, where we have a row number that we keep on the table. We have a current page local variable, a page size local variable, and we have to do this goofy math every single time we want to bring back a page. Well, this Denali allows us to do something a little simpler, and I'll show you in this little example here. In a nutshell, what we're doing is here, I'm just creating a temporary table. I'm going to fill this temporary table with the values 1, just an integer column with the values 1 through 10 right here. Simple enough. I'm going to print it all out, and then I'm going to drop it, and then we'll get to these other two rows next. So, as you would expect, this is going to give me my values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way down, just as we would expect. Now if we say offset, what offset does is it goes ahead and skips a certain number of rows or before it starts. So we'll see. We'll comment this one out, and we'll see the effect of this one. One of the tricks about the offset is that the order by clause is required. It's not optional. So you'll see, even if it's in any case that you use the offset or the fetch, that the order by is required. So let's do it here when we offset it by 3 rows and see what happens. And if we execute that, we notice that instead of returning all of it, it skipped the first 3 rows, right, and started with our 4th item in 4 to 10. Kind of neat. So we can do that. Imagine that in a paging scenario where we want to say, okay, just bring us these items back that were 26 through 50 and then 51 through 75, that kind of thing. And of course, these numbers can be parameters, they can be dynamic, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we use this fetch command, because this fetch command says only bring me back a certain number of rows. So we're going to still order by the ID. We're going to offset it by 0 rows, which means start at the beginning. And I'm going to say, bring me back only the next 5 rows. If I do that, as we expected, just the first 5 rows, we started with 0. We only brought back 5 again. So it'll be very handy when it comes to paging. So you can see how nice that command is going to be. And we'll go on to the next one, sequences. Sequences allow us the opportunity to create an increasing variable that is maintained between objects, between tables in this case. And we can go ahead and continue to iterate and increase this variable value and insert that, whatever the current value is in the sequence, into wherever we are in our process. I'll show you if my explanation wasn't that clear. You'll certainly understand what I mean after this example. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to create 2 temporary tables. Easy enough, right? We're going to call them table 1 and table 2. We're going to create a sequence here. So we're going to name our sequence. We're going to tell it what we want to start with and how we want to increment this sequence. Fairly simple. Again, the very, very basic, starting with 1 and going up by 1. And then here's the tricky, not the tricky part, but here's the fun part here. What we're going to do is we're going to insert values into our table. We're going to insert these names, of course, and we're also going to insert in the ID column whatever value is up in the My Sequence sequence. So you can see in table 1, we're going to put Bob with whatever value it's in. Table 1, we're going to put Mary. Then we're going to move over to table 2 and put Joe and Sue. And normally, traditionally, if we have identity columns, as our primary key, then of course they will all have their own sequence, and Bob will be 1, Mary would be 2, Joe would be 1, Sue would be 2, and going back to table 1, of course Dave is ready for 3 on table 1. Because we're maintaining an independent sequence, this number keeps increasing as we go along. And then we'll just, of course, show that we have indeed put those in the increasing sequence numbers in the ID columns, and then I'll just do a little cleanup work right there. And here we go. And again, this is as we expected. We saw the IDs of 1, 2, and 5 in the first table, and 3 and 4. So this has a whole bunch of different uses that I really would love to get into now, but for lack of time, we really won't, since it's half past the hour. But you can see why maintaining the possibilities of being able to maintain an independent sequence across multiple tables, whether they're temporary tables or permanent tables or whatever the objects that you happen to have. Very cool stuff. And now, the last one. This one's kind of cool. I don't know if this is going to have a major effect on things, but I always found it kind of difficult to go ahead and figure how the last day of the month is. It's never something that's easy to do. Doable, but not that easy. So what we traditionally do, we would add a month, we would subtract a day, and that kind of thing, and we come up with something like this. So if we come up with something like this, we'll see, okay, 9/30, that's the last day of this month. Now we have this handy-dandy little function that says, okay, just give me the end of the month, just give me the last day of the month. Very cool stuff. There you go. So how much more simple could that be? Of course, this also can be a variable or whatever you need, or literal. And then as well, sometimes we have the need to get the first day of the month. Well, in that case, we very easily just add 1 day to the same end of the month function. So what's the first day of next month? Naturally, it's October 1st. So again, not the most mind-blowing little function that they're included, or piece of Denali there, but I think that's going to be something that's going to come real in handy to make your code a lot more readable. And that, I believe, is the end of my presentation there. Hold on a second. We will go back to the slide deck, I think. There we go. And really quickly, in case you care to ask me any questions or follow me on Twitter, this is my information. And it was very nice speaking to you folks for a very short time this morning. And what I am going to do is I am going to transfer it over to Mr. Chad Churchwell. And I'm going to do that right now. Let's see if I can figure that out.
Thank you, Troy.
All
Can you
right.
hear me okay?
I can indeed. I'll stay on the line until I see your slide deck come on the screen, because right now I'm showing Adam's. There we go.
Got it now?
There it is. Yes, there it is. I can see it.
Okay.
All right, have fun, Chad.
All right. Good morning. I'm Chad Churchwell. I'm one of the consultants here at Pragmatic Works, and today I'm going to talk to you about some of the new security features that are coming up with Denali. The agenda, we're going to go over a new concept called contained databases, which is really trying to separate the application model from the management model within your databases. And we're also going to talk about user-defined roles, because in the past you get the fixed server roles. Now we have the ability to create our own user-defined server roles. So I'm going to have a few slides to go through, and then a demo on each of these concepts. So contained databases, the intent is to have no configuration dependencies on the instance. There's a concept known as the application boundary, which is the boundary that separates the application side from the management side. An example would be in 2005 or 2008, you have a database and you have logins that the application uses to access that database. Well, those are outside of the scope of that database. What contained databases are going to do is give you the ability to create users directly in the database with a login and a password. And when they connect to Management Studio, they actually have to specify that database name or they can't authenticate. But it's not tied to a login back in the system databases. So there's three different modes for contained databases: full, partial, and none. None is the default. Partial means that you do have objects within your database that could cross boundaries. Full mode is promised to be in a future release. It's not supported right now, but they have the intent of having a fully contained database. The benefit for contained databases is to easily move your databases between environments or server to server. I'm sure we've all been tasked with standing up a demo or a trading environment or refreshing a QA environment. And when you do the backup and restore, you end up with orphan logins. You have to fix it, misaligned SIDs. There's just a lot of overhead that goes along with porting a database from one server to the other. The other benefit is security-wise. So you can control the security within that database. You can give your application administrator, DB owner, to that database without having to give them any kind of server-level access or be tied to a login. There's two configuration properties that have the default was none, like I mentioned, but there's also a server-wide instance setting that has to be set to allow contained databases. You'll see this in the demo, but it's a contained database authentication. And then there's also a database property. When the default, if you just issue to create database, the default would be containment equal none. If you want to create a contained database, you would have to put in the clause containment equal partial. If you had an existing database you wanted to convert to a contained database, you would alter database, set containment equal to partial also. There are a few concerns with these contained databases. If you have the guest account enabled and you create a user inside a contained database, he correctly authenticates and gets into that database, he will be able to access other databases on that server if the guest account is enabled. Best practice is not to enable the guest account, so that they did put that in the documentation as a concern. Another concern would be duplicate logins. So you could actually create a login, a SQL authentication login with a username and password at the server level, and then create a database username and password where the password is the same and the username is the same within the database. And then when they connect, there's some conflicts there, and you could end up with denial of service. So the last big change is, I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons for coming up with this concept would be the ability to give application owners, like DB owner, access to their databases. Well, if they have DB owner, they can go make changes, configuration changes, without the server-wide DBA being aware of those changes. So that's another thing to be concerned with. So now we're going to talk a little bit about user-defined roles, server roles. Only the server level permissions can be assigned to these. To get a list of those, you can query this function that I put in here, and that'll give you all the server level permissions that you can use to assign to one of your user-defined server roles. Only server-level principals can be added to these roles once they're being created, and it has to be owned by a server-level principal. So this is truly a server-level concept. And members, if you're a member of a user-defined server role, you cannot add other members. This is my email address if anyone has any questions, and I'm about to close the PowerPoint and go into the demo. Okay, so I have a Denali instance here, 11.0.1440, and here's the create database statement with containment equal partial. I expect this to fail because the server level property hasn't been set yet. Maybe it had been set. The right here can enable contain database. I did have it set, so that would be the default false. So now if you try to create this database with your default install of Denali, you'll get the SP configure contain database authentication must be set to 1. You just saw how I was able to change it through the GUI by going to server properties, advanced, and it's the containment section right there. And it is false, so I could easily change that to true right here. I'm not. I'm going to show you how to do it in script form. So we've SP configure command. So once I run this, that gives the server or the instance property to the ability to create contain databases. So now that that's set, I'm able to create this database with containment equal partial. So this is an example on how to create a user with a password within this newly created contained database. You can notice there's no create login. It's just create user with password equals so-and-so in the context of that database. So execute that. Now, if you have a contained database and you want to make it not contained, this would be the command you would run. It's just an alter database set containment equal none. Or if you had one that was not contained and wanted to make it partial contained, it'd be the same type syntax except for the word partial instead of none. So here I'm going to create a login called non-contained user with the password, just like you would typically create a login today. And now I'm going to create a user within my contained database for that login, give him data reader access. So now brings us to a few of the DMVs we might be concerned about. If you are wondering if you have an existing database that you are considering making a contained database, this is the DMV that would tell you you're potentially uncontained entities. That's why I created that user ahead of time, because basically we created a login, a system-wide login, gave it access to the database. So that should come up right there. There's the data. This comes up by default because it's one of the built-in routes. I've yet to find out how to get by that. But you can see right here we have a database principal that came in. So what we're going to do here is we're going to migrate that user. There's a store procedure that you can migrate a user to a contained user. You know, the user I created in the database was create user, contained user. So I'm going to migrate that user from a login to a contained database user. So now when I go back and run that DMV, the database principal is gone. So, you do this to kind of troubleshoot what all you need to resolve to truly make your database a contained database. So that's it for the database containment demo. Now I'm going to go into the server role. So here's my server roles. If I refresh that, you'll see those are all the defaults that come. So I'm going to create a new server role and give it a server principal as the owner. And I also mentioned that only server level permissions can be assigned to these user-defined server roles. This is the system function that will show you all the commands you could assign to this new role that I created. So I'm going to grant alter any database to my new user-defined server role. You can add integrated users or SQL authentication users to these roles. So here I'm going to, this is a syntax for adding a SQL authentication user. That user already exists right here. So adding him to my new role. And then you can also assign a fixed role to your new user-defined server role. So this is an example of how you would do that. Now you can also do this through the GUI. So if I refresh my server roles here, there it is, new server role. Through the GUI, you could right-click and go new server role. Click on your securables, and here come all your permissions. So I could give this guy alter any database. Put in my owner. And I'll use my same little SQL account here that I want to have membership to this. And then I'm going to also make this user-defined server role a member of security admin. And then click OK, and that's how you would do it through the GUI. So the demo script-wise is basically the same thing you could do through that GUI that I just went through. So that pretty much ends my presentation on some of the new security features within Denali. And now I'm going to transfer over to Bear White to talk about some of the developer features. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Chad. All right, and let me show you a screen here. And let me get my slides up here. All right, great. So my name is Bear White. I'm over the product development here at Pragmatic Works. I'm really excited about a lot of these features that are in Denali, especially some of the features that we saw today, especially looking at the pagination. That looks really popular for if you're building your own rich controls that handle that pagination. You can really take advantage of that instead of some of the complex stuff that we do in development with code. So let's go ahead and step into it. So developing with Juno, I mean, everything that we've seen with the IDE is Visual Studio 2010, which is extremely exciting. And Microsoft's come to the conclusion, hey, let's go ahead and add all these things together. Let's add the BI tools. Let's add the management studio and the application development. So we've got that one place to really take advantage of doing database development. We've had a lot of shortcomings with where's bids located in 2008, where's bids located in 2010, what the plan is. And so we have that now for doing this development. Another really, really cool feature is the model-based development that we've been kind of taking advantage of as developers for the past couple of years, something that looks at object relational modeling and allows you to develop software in an encapsulating way where things are strictly focused on that model. You can visually see this model, you can make changes to the model, you can add all the relationships to that data through that model. So they've taken on the entity framework design, and now that's implemented within Juno. It is essentially a first-class component for doing development with entity framework. So what we're talking about essentially is the SQL Server development tools, the SSDT, and this is the integration of database development with application development. One of the really cool features that we have is the unit testing. Developers, that's a must for us. We've got to do unit testing, and one of the new features we have in Juno is being able to develop against a database that's really offline. So we don't actually have to have a physical server, database server to do that development. It's a lightweight mechanism for acting like a database, so we can do that unit testing, a lot less overhead. And there's also potential for application scenarios as well. If we wanted to utilize that offline capability for doing certain functionality with our applications, we can leverage that as well. All right, so some of the stuff I was talking about earlier with the entity framework and SQL Server project. So baked into our IDE, we've got the templates for building these entities that we can or even pass over to developers. So DBAs can build what we would call our data access layer using the database, using drag and drop capabilities of pulling these tables onto a canvas and being able to add relationships to these entities, where all of a sudden development takes more of a real-world scenario, or in this case a development scenario where everything we see is the same experience that we would have in the development as well. So now we've got that one place for doing a lot of that. Another cool feature that I saw is the Schema Compare, being able to compare a schema against a target database. That is essentially very powerful. Being able to pick up any changes that we might have within those database schemas. I know for my sake, I can't wait for this feature. A lot of this, you'd have to buy third-party tools for doing a lot of this compare scenarios. All right, so extending data with a file table. This is pretty cool. Right now, if you store images or if you store files in the database, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for setting that up with file streams. Also, if you're doing that over the web, setting up HTTP handlers to kind of do a lot of that interaction. So this is kind of baked into Denali, so where we can specify a file structure, allow people to put media files in there. Of course, this is wrapped around Active Directory, so we can secure that, but allow people to put files in there and let our existing applications still take advantage of that data if it's already existing in SQL Server to have those features within our application. If you really think about it, it's the other way too. If there's applications that haven't been built yet that take advantage of the SQL Server as far as keeping unstructured files in there, it can easily be built. And then someone that's maybe not as technical can drop those files into that file structure or that file server, and then they will be pushed out over into SQL Server as well. Now, based on everything I'm reading, these files are not being stored on the file structure or the file server. They're actually being stored in SQL Server. It's just a mirroring approach of where that data is coming from. So there's a really cool feature that reduces that overhead for syncing those files between file servers and SQL Server as well, and within your application. All right, so get your head in the cloud. Everybody's telling us, get your head out of the cloud. We've been told that ever since we were kids. We now have a first-class component for doing cloud development. SQL Server 2008 R2 pretty much gave us that feature of being able to work with SQL Azure, and it does a fairly good job. But there's a lot of good features that we're going to have with Denali for actually building data tier application components, which are essentially these packages. If you see on my slides, it's a .bac PAC. It's a serialized new logical format for taking essentially all of the database objects, putting them into a file, and being able to push them between different either data centers, so on-premise, but also out in SQL Azure as well. Another cool feature is the SQL Azure Data Sync for bidirectional data sync between on-premise and cloud. That's extremely important as more organizations start moving to the cloud. That is something that you're going to need. A lot of people, a lot of organizations might be somewhat reluctant to move to the cloud because of that feature alone. So that's a pretty powerful feature as well. And so those are my slides. I'm going to go ahead and move this over to Gareth. And thank you very much. All right, Gareth, you got it? Very good.
Yeah, am I unmuted now? There we go. Alrighty. Can you see my slide deck there?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine and see your lead slide there. We're good to go.
Okay, excellent. Well, good afternoon, guys. It's almost afternoon here on the East Coast. My name is Gareth, and I am going to be talking about Always On. This is a very interesting feature, and what's nice is it's got some really nice improvements over the existing technology that's built into SQL. First of all, here's a slide that's about me. I'm a DBA consultant for Pragmatic Works, and I work on the system side more mostly than the BI side of the house. Basically, with Always On, it's building on top of the mirroring and clustering that SQL Server and Windows Server have got currently. The requirements for Always On is that all the servers must be in a single cluster, and with 2008, Windows Server 2008, you can actually have multi-site and multi-subnets clusters, and that's what SQL Always On is actually building on top of. You can have servers in a single data center, say in Miami, and then you can have another server in a data center in Atlanta, and you can actually put them in the same cluster, and you can actually put Always On top of that and get the mirroring functionality that you've got in 2008. One thing is the databases must be in full recovery model for all things, because it's actually using the transaction log replication that mirroring has been using for the last while. Okay, Always On, like I said, is a combination of clustering and mirroring, taking the best parts of each and putting them together. And the way that it does that is it's used what called availability groups. Now, availability group is a container of databases and the nodes that those databases can run on. And what you do, I'll show you a little bit later, is you actually configure an availability group. You pick whichever databases you want in there, and you pick the nodes that those databases are going to run on, and those nodes are called replicas. And that's how you build your failover availability group. Okay, let's move on to some of the key features of Always On. The first one is that you can have multiple databases in one availability group, and that is huge, because currently in 2008 SQL, you can only have one database failover at a time. Whether it's automatic or manual, only one database can be replicated to a mirror. You can have multiple databases on one server replicated to multiple databases on another mirror, but they are individual mirror setups. The second thing is you can actually have multiple secondaries, multiple partners. And that is great, because right now you can only have one database server that you're going to fail over to. And going forward, you can actually have multiple. Now you can have a server in Atlanta, server in New York, server in Houston, and they can all have a copy of your database. And while those copies are secondaries, they are actually readable and active. Currently, when you set up a mirror, the partner is not readable at all. The only way you can access the data is pretty much just do a snapshot of it, and then it's not even real-time data that you're getting. It's whatever time the snapshot was taken. So what's great about having readable secondaries is you can do reporting off of a secondary server, you can do backups off a secondary server, logging, error logging, all that good stuff. That's going to really be awesome. The next feature is synchronous mirroring and asynchronous mirroring, and the way that that is implemented is the same as high safety and high performance is implemented currently in Server 2008. What they've improved on is that you can have two synchronous secondaries. In other words, you can have a server in Miami and a server in Atlanta, and if data changes in the server in Miami, then you can go and immediately write that change to the server in Atlanta, and it's real time. Plus, you can have another secondary in some other location. And then you can have up to another 2 asynchronous mirrors for things like near real-time reporting and something like that. These databases can be failed over manually or automatically. And I was never a huge proponent for automatic failover, because if a little network glitch happens, then the database would fail over, and you never know when that's going to happen. But now, with the new way that they've implemented the cluster, it actually works pretty well. You can still do manual failover, and a lot of shops are going to do that because it gives the database administrators much more control over what happens. As with 2008, they've carried over the automatic page repair, and what that is if there's a corrupt page in the primary or a corrupt page even in the secondary, what the always on will do is it will actually go fetch a correct page from wherever it can find it and actually repair the pages that are corrupt on the fly. Another key feature is that you can have the replication publisher failed over to your secondaries, to any of your secondaries, and that is really awesome because right now you can't do that. And the same with file stream replication. They've actually added that in, and you can fail over and the file stream will actually work. With the new always on, they've actually integrated a new dashboard and a new diagnostic infrastructure, and it really works well and it looks really good. I'm hoping to see if we can show you that, but we'll see what happens. There is a lot of new features that you can use using PowerShell to manage always on. There's scripts that you can use to set up the always on. The scripts you can use to manage, to query, to see error logs, all that good stuff. And one of the major big ones that they are touting, Microsoft is touting, is that when you connect to the always on availability group, you're actually connecting to the virtual name. So the application will fail over to whatever server it's running on. And that is really nice because it actually makes sure that the connection string is changed from the client side. There are some things that we're going to look at quickly. Let me see if I can bring up my virtual machine. There we go. And within SQL, when you set up your availability groups, the first thing that you have to do is you have to go here into SQL Server Configuration Manager. You have to right-click on your SQL Server instance, go into Properties, and you will see that there's a new tab, and it's called Always on High Availability. And you have to make sure that this specific SQL is a member in a failover cluster. And there's a box here that says Enable Always on Availability Groups. In order to use Always on, you have to do this to every single node that's going to participate in the availability group. And once you've done that, you have to stop and restart your SQL instance. Okay. Now, unfortunately, my cluster is not working right now, but I can just show you. Underneath Management here in the Management Studio, there is a new subgroup called Availability Groups. And in order to create your availability group, you go here and you click on New Availability Group Wizard. You click Next, and then you pick your availability group name. Say App 1, you click Next, and in here it'll actually go and check and see which databases are available to add to this. You click on the database that you want to add, you click Next, and it's going to go and specify replicas. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a replica, so I can't show you this, but one thing I wanted to touch on is that when you create this availability group, it'll actually create all the endpoints and everything for you, the same as when you set up mirroring previously. Okay, so we're going to have to cancel out of that, but that is the way that you set up the availability groups inside the new SQL Server Denali. Let's go back to, I have a few links here if you want to go and read up on the new Denali availability always on stuff. There are blogs from the always on team, and there's the books online page, and this slide decks will be available after the webinar. We'll be going to uploading them to our website so that you can go and get it, and you can go and get all these links. Here are the Windows clustering links, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of things, some important notes that I have actually found about the always on is one database can only be part of one availability group. One thing that they have said is databases across instances cannot be part of the same availability group on the same server. One specific thing that you need to watch out for is that agent jobs are not failed over. They do have to be managed manually, but Microsoft is working on that, and because we're only working on CTP3 right now, there's a good chance that they're going to have that all fixed up by the time the RTM comes out. What is nice is that there is support for TempDB on a local drive within the cluster, which is not available in 2008 right now. So if you guys need to find out anything more about Always On, please contact us. There is my contact information, or you can get hold of us here at Pragmatic Works, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it or answer any questions that you have about all that stuff. One thing I'd like to point out is SQL Pass is coming up next month, and I hope everybody's going. I hope to be going myself. We'll have to see what kind of projects come up in the next couple of weeks. And I'm glad that you guys were able to join us. Thank you for coming, and thanks for sticking around. I know it's a little bit after 12, so I hope everybody has a great lunchtime and a great day, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much.
The organizer has ended the